Suspicion is a virtue, so long as its object is the public good, and so long as it stays within proper bounds. Guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it except for downright force. And when you give up that force, you are inevitably ruined. These are the words of Virginia's first governor, Patrick Henry, His Excellency, a man who I am deeply, deeply inspired by. Not only did he fund a great amount of the Revolutionary War, he even bought Virginia their first warship. He was also our first governor. And this is a man, sure, he had flaws, but he was, to say the least, an extraordinary man that I am just, I don't want to ramble for too long about him, because I think his legacy is in that he instilled in Virginians a path forward, a path that we just simply refuse to bow to tyrants. I am Travis Joshua Wells of the Twitter page Appalachian Liberty. This is my new podcast. We are going to call it the Great Object Podcast. You'll see why shortly. The reason for the name of this podcast is, gotta switch screens here. The reason for, and bear with me on this technology stuff because it's really not my forte. I do intend to get better at it, but the only way to really get better at these sort of things is to just jump in and start doing it. Jump in, start swimming, build the plane as you're flying it. So let's just hit the ground running here. And ultimately, I want this first episode to serve as a sort of, I want to say, mission statement, which is what you see in the name here. The reason for that is because it seems like everybody and their brother has a podcast today, and I'm definitely not talking junk about people who have podcasts. I'm talking about I want us as a people to start being more effective. And the name, the Great Object Podcast, is based on this quote by Patrick Henry here. And we're just going to switch to that. The militia is our ultimate safety. We can have no security without it. The great object is that every man be armed. And while that may seem like not such a big deal, I want you to understand that I mean every man be armed. Doesn't matter what your race, religion, whatever. The great object is that every man be armed, because we live in a world that is ruled by an endless string of tyrants. The second you get rid of one, 10 more pop up to take his place or her place in the in what looks likely for Virginia's new governor. So let's just go through a couple Patrick Henry quotes here. Show me that age and country where the rights and liberties of the people were placed on the sole chance of their rulers being good men, without a consequent loss of liberty. Patrick Henry. Of course, the quote that I opened up with, suspicion is a virtue as long as its object is the public good, and as long as it stays within proper bounds. Guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect every one who approaches that jewel. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it but downright force. And once you've given up that force, you are inevitably ruined. This is a AI-generated logo. I usually don't like AI very much, but I'm not an artist. So if one of you are an artist, I would greatly appreciate you drawing me up something that's somewhat similar to this. I like the woodsman themes, but mostly I want to focus on my words here. It says study freedom, self-rescue, and F the state, with, the U switched upside down. That helps with AI sensors and stuff like that. What we're going to be doing on this podcast is studying freedom. We are going to be studying methods of self-rescue. We are going to be studying very key moments in history that I believe not only show that free men being willing to stand up against tyrants are the path forward. We're not just the ones making the path, we are the path. All right. So, as most of you know, I'm a history nerd. I don't really consider myself a historian because I don't think I've earned that title yet, but I am definitely a history nerd. I love diving into the history of humanity and finding epics like the one in this image that you may or may not recognize here. Because sometimes these perfect moments in history show up, and men who just buckle down and refuse to submit to tyrants, men that absolutely trust everything in God, and I am a man of deep faith. I very much believe in God. Those men will buckle down, and they will go and they will hide in a cave, and they will taunt the tyrant to come get them, which I think is just a cornerstone of Appalachian culture, of course. We are a people we are the only people in the United States that has managed to get a constitutional amendment overturned. Technically, the 18th Amendment was never repealed or overturned. It was abrogated. That's the constitutional term. It was stricken out by the 21st Amendment. What the 18th Amendment was is it was establishing prohibition of all alcohol on U.S. soil. And in the past, well, actually, for quite a long time, like we're talking thousands of years, the people that I descend from, the Scotch-Irish and the Germanic peoples, brewing alcohol was not only a wholesome pastime, but it was how they made their living. It was how they fed their families. It was how water quality was in the back in hundreds, even just 50, 60 years ago. People needed alcohol in order to not only stay hydrated, but to counteract the crap that they were drinking in. And I don't mean that in the crude sense. I'm talking about actual crap, because separation from filthy and the separation between filthy and potable water, that's a pretty new thing. Children in France are still allowed to drink alcohol today. America is quite a bit more, I don't want to say prudent about it, but they greatly misunderstand how alcohol can help the system. Even in, I think it's 1 Timothy, the Apostle Paul is urging Timothy to drink a little wine. We're going to get into this a little more heavily later, but the battle you're seeing right here is the Battle of Covadonga. This is one of the most, honestly, I think it's probably the most important battle in human history. I'm not talking about the most important battle in American or Spanish or anything history. I'm talking about in human history. This is the battle that chose which philosophy was going to eventually inherit the earth. Because 300 men following soon-to-be King Don Pelayo decided that they were not going to submit to the Umayyad and the Moors, Muslim invaders. What happened is in North Africa, the guardian of the Strait of Gibraltar decided to betray the Visigoth Spain, and he told the Muslim the wannabe Muslim invaders that not only would he let them pass, but he would give them the ships to do it. So of course they invaded Spain, and they started pillaging and destroying everything in their path. And this went so poorly that pretty much all of Visigoth Spain completely collapsed. And as they were inevitably driven further and further north, a man named Don Pelayo, I don't want to go too deeply into his story because I think the ultimate point is him saying no, but he was of nobility. He was ultimately what he was trying to do at first was he was trying to save his sister from being married off to one of the Muslim invaders, because they were trying to erase his bloodline and take over any legitimacy that came from it. And he refused. He traveled further. He traveled north. He went and he basically confronted this man and then rescued his sister. And then they went further north into the mountains, basically very similar terrain to Appalachia. And he found people who were willing to follow him. These people were fascinated that he wasn't afraid. He wasn't even remotely fazed by the almost impossible odds that these now exiled Visigoths were facing. And he made his stand in Covadongo Cave. We'll get more into that here in a minute. But today, this same cave still exists. As you can see, it's very sharp, and forgive me the image quality here. This is the best picture I could find of it, but there's a church there now. It is a holy site in the Catholic Church. It's debated about what Covadongo means, but the most accepted one is Cave of Our Lady, as in Our Lady the Virgin Mary. She is credited with some of the most almost unbelievable miracles known to man. But he took a stand in this cave. And she is obviously the mother of Christ, and miracles happen when it comes to her. We'll get more into that here in a minute. As some of you know, I am also a survivalist, and I believe in being prepared for just about anything. I believe in studying nature. I was studying natural law, and I typically consider myself a libertarian. I am in the American Liberty Caucus. I am the Virginia State Representative for them. You'll probably catch me at conventions coming up soon. I am a survivalist. I believe in studying nature. I believe in that the very laws of God are written into nature itself, and that as we grow closer to nature, we also get closer to God. Which is one of the things that has impressed me about Sean and Justin, who started this American Liberty Caucus. They came to me and invited me to a meeting, and I was just sitting there going through the planks and deciding if I wanted anything to do with it, because, you know, you get invited to a lot of Republican honey traps when you're a libertarian, and I had been burned before, and I wasn't going to fall for another Republican. But turns out these guys are the real deal. George Orwell talks about in 1984. He talks about a society that has had its history taken from it. And I think there's a very, very poignant reason as to why that history has been taken from them. In many real ways, it's been taken from us, especially as Americans, especially as humans. Because if you study history, like we're going to do on this podcast, if you study history and see history unfolding, and you see, oh man, Don Pelayo stood against 183,000 Moors with 300 guys and won? What the crap, right? What I really want to understand and study is what it means to be human. I want to know, can we pierce the veil and understand what reality itself actually is? Because if you really think about it, this world doesn't make sense. There doesn't seem to be a point to it. There doesn't seem to be a reason for us to go through the things we do. There doesn't seem to be a purpose to it all. Sometimes, even in Ecclesiastes, it talks about how everything's meaningless. You know, the reason why I study natural law, the reason why I study physics and history, is because I feel like there are brief moments in history that have given us a peek, where you see things that show what this is all about. I think we can get hints of these things in history at key moments when we can clearly see the hand of God moving as it flicks a seemingly unbeatable tyrant over just like nothing more than a chess piece on a game. As I said, the American Liberty Caucus, they impressed me with their planks, especially when I got to the points where they were quoting Patrick Henry. So what I am is I'm a libertarian. I typically consider myself a libertarian. Obviously, there's jokes about, oh, you're not a real libertarian. I believe in a minimal government. I'm more of a minarchist. I believe that there should be a system because there has to be. I think if you look at, just go watch the cart return at Walmart one day. Like, just sit there for maybe 30 minutes to an hour even. And some people will put their carts, actually most people will put their carts away, but sometimes in outright chaos, people just start leaving their buggies everywhere and people start hitting them. And I think that's a nice allegory for if there's ever really truly not a government. And I know anarchists are probably screaming at the screen right now, and that's fine. I don't have anything negative to say about you guys. I do think you assume that most people are good and intelligent people like you are, and some people just aren't. Libertarians, we aren't really effective, are we? The party is plagued by problems like this. This is probably the greatest meme that this is a meme we're never going to live down as a party. This is always going to be there forever. Going to get rid of your eyes there. We spend most of our time tearing chunks out of people we need with infighting. The most productive thing we do is sit around talking about a utopian system that will never exist, and it can never exist. We spend so much time talking about a world and how it should be that we never fit even a moment to try to address and interact with the world the way it truly is. It's a messy world, and liberty is a messy concept. Anybody who loves liberty and knows liberty, they're going to understand that liberty is a very, I don't want to say chaotic concept, but it's a messy concept. There's always going to be somebody out there doing something that you yourself don't approve of. We need to start looking at the world the way it truly operates. I believe the Libertarian Party, I believe they raised roughly $500,000 in the last presidential election. We do not have these big donors like AIPAC or the Soros Foundations, the World Banks, and we will never have that because I submit to you that the system is working exactly as intended. They just work for their donors, and oftentimes their donors, and like if you took Republican donors and Democrat donors and you did a Venn diagram, it's almost a complete circle. There's very few outliers there. Our fundraising is frankly dog crap. And the money we do raise gets wasted on infighting and lawsuits, suing the chair for doing things that technically she or he has the ability to do. I do think we need to start figuring out ways to prevent these things because most of the money that the Libertarian Party raises gets wasted. And even then, you're looking at both the Republicans and the Democrats. The second we become an actual threat, they're going to start suing the crap out of us too. And that's pretty much the legal tactic of the century is that people like these big billionaires know that the courts are on their side. They know that they have the money for lengthy court battles and constant delays, but we don't. The poor people don't. My friends, we collectively have our heads as a party so far up our asses that we can smell yesterday's breakfast before it even stinks. And we need to do something about that. How do we fix it? How do we fix it? I offer you the words of our 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt. His face is on the side of a mountain, by the way. Complaining about a problem without proposing a solution is called whining. I am not here to whine. I am not here to cry and complain into the microphone and be like, oh, this sucks so much. And it does suck, but I'm here to try to, the mission statement of this podcast is that we're going to try to find solutions. Solutions that everyday men like me and you can individually do to fix things. As with all things in life, I think the ultimate question comes down to purpose. What is your purpose? What is my purpose? I believe that I'm playing to my strengths as a history nerd, as somebody who just reads way too many damn books by starting this podcast. I want to analyze history and figure out how we can defeat these tyrants. Because if you look at works like The Prince from Niccolo Machiavelli, he's talking about a very simple bag of tricks these tyrants use. He's talking about a simple bag of tricks that pretty much every single tyrant in history has used, and they're still using them today. Sure, they got technology, sure, they got AI algorithms and drones that can blow up kids from a couch somewhere, but the tricks, they stay the same. And these are propaganda tricks, these are financial tricks, these are ways of deceiving the masses to where the masses will just sit down and take it. We have today what I consider to be a perfect enemy. A perfect storm of political, financial, and social forces arrayed against us. As libertarians, we have a serious problem. Because, one, we have no political power, at least none, not really. We have no financial power. And as far as social forces arrayed against us, I recently had the pleasure of seeing Spike Cohen speak at the South Carolina Libertarian Convention. I also got to see Chase Oliver speak. They seem like they have their head on straight. They're intelligent people. To Spike Cohen, one of the things he spoke about is that we as libertarians are not normal. We are not normal people. We don't process things like normal people do. We are not normal. We are not normal people. We process things differently than most people do. Most people process things based on the person and how things make them feel. Libertarians were always consumed with how things make us think. We're analyzing economics. We're talking about Austrian economics, and most people immediately start hearing television static as soon as you hear economics, because it's boring. It's not entertaining at all. And they're right. It's boring. And they have every right to tune out on us. So what Spike talked about is that he was saying that we need to start focusing on the people themselves. He told a story that hit me pretty hard, because very few things in life will get me upset, but when somebody's abusing a kid, that'll send me into a berserk rage pretty quickly. He talked about how these parents in Georgia, they were not abusing their children. In fact, their child was sick. They had the child, I believe, if memory serves, had a immune system issue, and they in the state just randomly took the children and called it abuse. And this child was very, very sick. And they kept taking the children. And they even gave them to, I believe, the grandparents. Spike obviously tells the story way better than I could possibly, because I'm working just off of a terrible memory here. But the gist of it is that they took this child, and the child wasn't even being abused. The parents finally, after 3 years, thanks to Spike's foundation, We Are the Power. Oh, You Are the Power. I'm sorry, Spike. He said that they were able to get put enough pressure on these politicians to get them to take another look at this case and get another trial. And then the jury finally got wind that they were being played, that all exculpatory evidence of these good parents that would prove that they were innocent was being hidden from them. So the jury, to a man, voted to give the parents to acquit the parents of their of abuse, and that started the ball rolling that they were able to get their child back. And this is all thanks to You Are the Power, which is Spike Cohen's his organization. I highly recommend donating to them. I'm going to do so myself. Complaining about a problem without proposing a solution is called whining. Spike Cohen is not whining. He's doing solutions. Thank you, Spike. You're a real American hero. I mean that. Bottom of my heart. Now, moving on. Most people have seen this image. Politicians just having a good time and laughing. There's Republicans and there's Democrats in this photo. You got Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush. And I feel like when we're addressing the topic of the perfect enemy, we're talking about these just, and I don't mean literally lizard people. I don't want to sound like some tinfoil hat conspiracy nut job. But these are people that don't have any values. They don't have beliefs. They don't have what I would call morals. They don't even have a moral compass, let alone one that points north. They will do and say whatever it takes to get power. But here we are, you and me, just normal people. We're playing by the rules. We're thinking, oh, if I just vote in this guy, he'll fix everything. My friend, that's called hero worship. And hero worship is one of the most destructive pitfalls in human history. It is one of the most destructive and just outright, because it seems like every time people need that people get desperate, let's say, they get together and they're like, oh, well, what if we just change the boss? And this is where I start to agree with the anarchists, because you have what's rising on the right now, trying to say Hitler was a good guy again. And on the left, you got people saying, oh, Stalin and Mao weren't that bad. Yes, when in fact both of them, all three of them, were terrible people. Even if we are to sit back and try to give these men another thing, we have to look at what happened to their people during their reign, after their reign. I believe that a good leader does whatever's necessary. Now, my family name descends from a great house that assisted William the Conqueror. He was not a good king. In fact, he was a bloody and destructive tyrant. And of course, he tried buying his way into heaven as his life drew to a close. But we're talking about someone who's responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths. There's really no propaganda to teach us about how bad of a king William the Conqueror was. There's really no propaganda to teach us how bad people like Donald Trump or Barack Obama have been. And there's definitely very little propaganda to tell us how bad of a person, how bad of a president George Bush was. And I mean W. Bush, not Senior. Just the Iraq War alone, some estimates put it as high as 11 million people died. Direct combat casualties was somewhere around 200,000, but all wars expand into starvation, disease, displacement. These things kill people too. And some estimates put it up to around 11 million. That's just the Iraq War. And that's happened within most of our lifetimes. Most of us can remember that. I know I was cheering on the bombs as they fell in 2003 when we invaded Iraq, and it was only years later that I realized that it was just another banker's war. It was just another way of getting gold and oil, you know. Then, of course, Bush came along and finally went out of office, and here comes a man, Barack Obama, campaigning on peace. Before he's done anything, they give him the Nobel Peace Prize. Then he continues all of the wars. If you look at American history, honestly, in most countries' history, the anti-war candidate, the one who's pushing anti-war, usually wins. Most people don't want to see new wars coming out. And these politicians, they completely understand what to offer us because they have people screaming at them nonstop, especially on Twitter, about what they want. They have people nonstop saying, we don't want new wars. We want you to just keep us out of it. Woodrow Wilson, he promised us to keep us out of the war. That's how he won the second term. And then he gets us involved in World War I when the Lusitania goes down. So, of course, Obama, before he had done anything, wins the Nobel Peace Prize. They were hoping that it would inspire him to be a peaceful president. It didn't. He dropped more bombs and killed more kids than just about anybody. He even killed an American citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki. These politicians, I don't think they're real people. They don't have values like real people do. They don't have morals like real people do. I don't think any of them are worthy of our respect. And that brings me to Virginia. We have a new governor. She is not from Virginia. She is from New Jersey. As most people know, New Jersey is a shithole, and the entire state smells like piss. We have a carpetbagger coming down from New Jersey, Abigail Spanberger. I have drawn a funny little mustache on her because I have absolutely no respect for her whatsoever. This podcast is going to be mostly focusing on Second Amendment rights and how an armed and educated people are able to deter tyrants. I want you, and again, keep in mind Teddy Roosevelt quote, complaining about a problem without offering solution is called whining. We're not here to whine. We're here for solutions. Abigail Spanberger and the Democrats that just took over in Richmond, they are going to pass a whole bunch of laws is what they're talking about doing. I want you to pay attention to what's going to happen on Monday, January 19th. That's lobby day. You're going to see Virginia roll real hard, real fast. Virginians will not give up their guns. It's not going to happen. We are not a tame and compliant people. In 2001, Ralph Northam tried to do quite a bit of the same thing and take everybody's guns. And the militias marched out of the mountains. 94 sheriffs of 96 counties. 94 sheriffs out of 96. Each county has their own sheriff, of course. One marched to Richmond and said, "We will not enforce your gun laws." Richmond got the message. Richmond got the message pretty quickly because the militias said that Ralph Northam would be forcibly removed from office and that he would be tried before the National Guard. Militias are explicitly protected in the Virginia state constitution, thanks to our first governor, our real governor, Patrick Henry. Abigail Spanberger, you may sit in Patrick Henry's chair, but you are not worthy of it. At least it doesn't look like you are. I hope and I pray in the name of Jesus Christ that you decide to act wise. because we are not your subjects. We are free men. And we will not be ruled. We will be represented, but we will not be ruled. So please do not act unwise. Because Virginians, we're not the type of people to just lay down and take it. Please act wise. Please veto these bills, and you could be considered one of the greatest governors in Virginia history, especially since you're the first woman governor. So please, be reasonable, because you will not be getting any of our guns. So save yourself some embarrassment. This brings me to the point with the bankers. These politicians, I believe, because they have no morals, they have no decency, they have no principles that they would die for. They've sold their souls. They've sold their souls to the banking cartels. And in this image, you see a banking titan of the Rothschild family. This is Evelyn de Rothschild. He is poking the King of England in the chest. Now, at the time of this photo, he was not the King of England. But a proper king should be seeing this man pull back a nub, a bleeding nub, for poking him in the chest. That's how a king should behave. But as you see, this king is like a compliant little dog. I typically tend to make fun of the United Kingdom because they've just, all of their freedoms and liberty have collapsed over the years. Of course, you can go back to things like in 1815, the Peterloo Massacre. There was a demonstration that was demanding similar rights to what the U.S. colonists have. And they led a cavalry charge into this crowd, and quite a few people died, and quite a few more were injured. If those protesters had been armed like Americans are, would they have risked putting a cavalry charge into those people? No, I don't think they would have. It seems like whoever the real government is in the world, it seems like there's just these constant humiliation rituals that they make our leaders go through. Just controlling everything doesn't really suit them. They want to make things, they want to be seen as the rulers. This image is pretty embarrassing. And of course, Trump supporters are going to jump in the comments and be like, oh, he does that for a lot of world leaders. Sure, he's done it for a couple of them, but he does it every single time for Benjamin Netanyahu. AIPAC. I submit to you examples of a uniparty. AIPAC owns roughly 330 seats in our House of Representatives. They own, I think, 96 of our senators. When we're talking about the Democrat versus Republican divide, I think we need to really start talking about just the uniparty divide. There's very few Democrats who are not funded by AIPAC. There's even fewer Republicans who are not funded by AIPAC. I myself am a single issue voter from this day on. I am tired of our sovereignty being washed away. I am tired of the way Congress works. They seem to be able to get nothing done, but in the dark of night at 3 a.m., they will call everyone together in a secret meeting on certain bills, and that bill will pass 321 to 80 or something like that, and there will be very few people not voting. They show their hand in moments like these. They show their hand in moments, because we're all familiar with the government being incompetent. We're all familiar with the government working slowly, right? But there's certain times where the government works very, very, very fast. And I believe they show their hand in these moments. When you see a bill fly through the House of Representatives, through all the committees, and the Senate within, say, 24 hours and straight to the president's desk, that's because the real government has told them that they want that done. And I think Congress still has the authority to tell them no, but we're going to get into what happens when they get told no. It rhymes with JFK. This is a bill that has been tried to be passed many, many times. Many times many. The House will vote on an anti-First Amendment bill introducing fines and prison terms for Americans who participate in boycotts of Israel or Israeli settlements. This has not passed yet, but it has passed in smaller ways where certain things like in order to do business with the state of Texas, you have to sign a pledge that you will not boycott Israel. That is still working its way through the courts. Parts of it have been struck down, but not the entire thing. Why, on one side of the planet, do you have to, as a business, work with the state of Texas, pledge allegiance and fealty to another country that you've never even visited? That's important. This is something that I tend to tell all my friends about here. Of course, it's an older movie now. It's from Underworld. It's about a 20-second clip. Makes me think how libertarians are all acting, how we're always tearing chunks out of each other. We're the only party that has a snowball's chance in hell of opposing these people. But everything we do is so counterproductive. We act like rabid dogs.
You're acting like a pack of rabid dogs! And that, gentlemen, simply will not do. Not if you expect to defeat the vampires on their own ground. Not if you expect to survive at all.
I think that's a very important. There's many, many examples of government corruption, but I feel like government corruption always goes in one direction. It always goes towards centralized banking. It always goes towards the secret gears behind the throne. One of the most egregious things that I've seen recently is a man named Jonathan Pollard. This man was a traitor to America. He was actually convicted of treason. He shared military secrets with one of our adversaries, and he did 21 years in prison with it. And when he got out, he was flown directly to Israel. Just recently, he met with our ambassador, Mike Huckabee. Jonathan Pollard was welcomed as a hero for what he had done. 21 years in prison because he stole American secrets. These things have happened, and most people, they're very good about keeping them out of the news. They're very good about keeping them out of, your average tabloids. But until recently, the internet happened, which I consider the internet kind of a miracle from the hand of God. Because in the 90s, well, let's say the late 80s, they were still saying there would never be more than a handful of computers in the entire world. Now you got one in your pocket everywhere you go. You can talk to your buddy in the boondocks of China, out in the hills where there's barely any electricity. And you can still talk to him. You can talk to anybody, anywhere in the entire world. Tyrants are scrambling. They are scrambling for AI. They're scrambling for ways to control the narrative still. For centuries, tyrants scrambled to try to control things like the printing press. Governors during the American Revolution would seize printing presses because the memes that Benjamin Franklin would write, the articles, the hit pieces and things like that, the little pamphlets, things like that got passed out, like Thomas Paine's Common Sense. They were strong propaganda against the British. If you think about it, a printing press is pretty slow. You have to slowly wheel it down and make an impression and then wheel it back up and then re-ink the plates and all that, right? Then you have to hang them out to dry, and then you have to secretly pass them out very, very slowly. But now, you can't stop the signal. Now, information is traveling so much faster, which is where things like Palantir come in. Palantir is going to be able to see everything, everywhere, all at the same time. And you're going to be able to see AI algorithms quickly clip and stop certain narratives from spreading, certain rumors from spreading, certain stories from spreading. Tyrants need to control the flow of information. Our perfect enemy controls the banks. That brings me to this story of the Napoleonic Wars. Well, it's at the very end of the Napoleonic Wars, just before Napoleon himself was sent to St. Helena on the other side of on the bottom of the planet. When the Duke of Wellington and Napoleon fought at Waterloo, It was considered the nearest thing you'd ever seen. Messengers probably left before Napoleon was defeated. Napoleon was not ready for the Prussian advance. On his flank, one of his generals got out of formation, his flank collapsed, and his army was completely encircled. Anyway, Napoleon lost. Duke of Wellington won. But messengers rushed back to London because the London Stock Exchange, they were very, very, very interested in the outcome of this battle, because Napoleon had for many years tried to put pressure on London, on the English, to get them to play ball through trade sanctions. And they rushed back with the news that Napoleon had won. Napoleon was marching on London, but Napoleon had lost. What happened was the British pound fell off a cliff overnight. Over the next 3 days, people were trading in the British pound, silver, and they were taking silver certificates, which were essentially meaningless. The Rothschilds were buying up all of these things and issuing these silver certificates. The Rothschilds were buying up the British pound, acting like saints there to save the day. They knew that the information was false. Eventually, the real news that the Duke of Wellington had beaten Napoleon and had taken him captive finally made it back to London. And people just started buying the British pound again. They didn't realize what had already happened. Because of all those people selling the British pound very, very quickly, the Rothschilds Bank was able to steal roughly 36% of the British economy in just a few days. 36% of the British economy, because they were buying all those pounds back at a lower rate, being like, oh, the exchange rate has changed. So they were selling the people back what they had bought at roughly 60% of the value. So they gained. And this is where this Battle of Waterloo, the British, I believe, firmly became occupied by the banks. Napoleon, of course, wasn't the greatest guy. He was sent away to St. Helena, but the crazy thing is that this probably would have happened whether Napoleon won or not, because that's just how these banks operate. They fund both sides of the war. Whoever loses, they just take their pound of flesh out of them, and they take the pound of flesh out of the one who wins. This right here is, of course, a painting of the London Exchange, where they stole 36% of the London economy. The crazy thing is they stole it, and with a smile on their face. People were just completely unaware of how powerful the bank had just become. One of the quotes by a letter to Edward Carrington by our fourth president, Thomas Jefferson, says that paper money has some advantages, is admitted, but that its abuses are also inevitable. And by breaking up the measure of value, it makes a lottery of all private property cannot be denied. This brings us to The Creature from Jekyll Island. I strongly recommend looking into this book. This is the story of how the Federal Reserve was created. It was created by some billionaires on Jekyll Island. It was installed about 3 years after this meeting on Jekyll Island. Funny enough, all the major billionaires who opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve, they mysteriously died. Quite a lot of billionaires, let's put it this way, were on board the Titanic. They had tickets for the Titanic. The ones that were in favor of creating the Federal Reserve, they canceled their tickets right about the last minute, maybe the same day before the Titanic sailed. Some conspiracy theories are absolute nonsense. Some of them are just straight up bad shit, but some of them, they happened. So yeah, look into The Creature from Jekyll Island. Executive Order 6105, I believe, is this one. I don't see it on the page here, but this is the executive order where probably I'm going to go ahead and say our worst president. There's a couple that I have grudges against, like Warren Harding, but we'll get into that in another episode. FDR, he made it illegal for Americans to own gold. You're looking at the notice that was put all over every town, everywhere, that you had to turn over your gold to the Federal Reserve. And I know it sounds like I'm complaining and whining here, but we're going to get to this. Eventually, this was repealed. Eventually, it was struck down in court, and people started getting gold again. This was another heist, similar to how the English economy was stolen by the Rothschilds. This was stolen by the President of the United States in favor of the Federal Reserve. They bought all gold at a fixed rate that they themselves determined and forced the sale of most gold coins. Proud to say, my ancestors, they didn't comply because my ancestors don't comply with tyrants. They complied with William the Conqueror, but they were benefiting from that because they were barons, but nobody bats 1,000. Let's just say that. But my ancestors in American history, they didn't turn in their gold and silver. You know, when you're living off in the mountains where there's plenty of caves and hollers, you can hide things pretty easily. So what happened with this executive order is the president said, hey, you're not allowed to have gold anymore, and you have to sell it to the Federal Reserve. I think the Federal Reserve paid like $27 an ounce or something like that, which was quite a bit of money back. And then shortly after this was completed, this forced buyback of all the gold, they raised the price to around $37. You just seen FDR, who's the leftist hero for the whole New Deal and all that, who you hear endless propaganda about how great he is in history class growing up. You see that he stole roughly 30% of our economy that day doing this stupid little buyback. Our perfect enemy controls the politicians, because they control the banks. AIPAC, which was formerly the American Zionist Council. If you look at the JFK files, there's definite hints to Zionists killing him. We'll leave it there for now. Maybe in uncensored bits that I can do with subscribers later. We'll do that. I think Congress is ultimately controlled. A lot of the infighting and drama, you see people like Lindsey Graham snarling into a microphone, and then he walks up and gives Kamala Harris a fist bump. They show their hand. Marco Rubio recently walked up smiling to Chuck Schumer, patted him on the shoulder, and walked him away with a half hug like an old friend. They show their true colors in body language mostly. Our perfect enemy can kill anyone they want to, at any time, in broad daylight, on live TV. Now, I'm ashamed to say I voted for Trump after seeing him survive an assassination attempt. I mistakenly believed that he was going to be like, oh, I'm protected by God, so I don't have to deal with these people, so I don't have to be afraid of these people. But immediately he started just doing everything that the bankers and lizard people wanted him to do. Of course, metaphorical lizard people. Our perfect enemy can kill anyone they want, anytime they want, in broad daylight, and they'll get away with it. When JFK was assassinated, the House passed rules that they were not allowed to hold hearings about the JFK assassination while on the floor. So that's where the Church Street hearings come from. You can look into that more. Hold their meetings down the street from Congress on Church Street. Two gentlemen that you may have heard of. On the left, you have Gary Webb. He is the author of Dark Alliance. He was an extremely prominent journalist who was covering the crack epidemic and how it connected to the CIA, and how the CIA was bringing then drugs to fuel their black budget, and how certain neighborhoods were just being flooded with drugs to keep them chaotic. And it was it's a whole thing that really deserves its own podcast, at least its own. It kind of deserves its own series of podcast episodes. He was found with 2 gunshots in the back of his head. If memory serves, it was one in the side of his head and then one in the back of his head. And then he was right-handed, and I don't care how, I don't, and the gun was dropped in a different way than it would have fallen if indeed he had self-deleted himself. However, his death was ruled a self-delete. Pretty much nothing ever came of it. Now, the gentleman on the right is one that I think is especially deserving of like a Medal of Freedom at some point. This is Sergeant Terrence Yakey. He was one of the first responders at the Oklahoma City bombing in 1996. I was just a small child when I was watching this on TV. He was one of the first people that showed up and was trying to help people and trying to get people out of the rubble and everything like that. Every single one of the ATF agents was gone that day. They didn't show up to work. But they were first on the scene without even being called. Sergeant Terrence Yakey, he knew that they had not been called because he would have been the one to call them. He saw them removing explosives from the building. He saw them taking explosives out. Many explosive experts have analyzed the damage done to that building. There's no way that a fertilizer bomb parked on the street outside of it could have caused that kind of collapse. There would have been no compression, there would have been no tamping, anything like that. There was definitely a truck out there, but as for what actually destroyed the building, Sergeant Yakey here started spreading the word, doing interviews and writing pieces about what he saw that day as the ATF took bombs out of the building that he seen that were attached to load-bearing pillars and all that. He was found in the desert shortly after a phone call with his wife. He had been telling his wife that he was being followed and that he was going to shake these feds, I believe was his words, and then he would call her back soon. She never heard from him again. He was found in the desert. He had a gunshot to the side of his temple, I believe. I forget the exact location. Yeah, okay. Here's the autopsy. It was to his temple. It was ruled a self-delete. The red is the entry wound and the green is the exit wound. It was ruled a self-delete. His body was cremated before his family was ever able to view it. Of course, there's endless memes about Hillary Clinton and her 56 friends that have self-deleted. One of them was found hanging by an extension cord on a farm he had never visited before, and he had seemingly shot himself in the chest with a shotgun, and the gun had flew quite a ways away, further than it would have flown through simple recoil. I'm just trying to hammer into your head the perfect enemy that we're fighting. This is the reason why I am so disturbed about the behavior of the Libertarian Party, because we're the only ones that can actually affect a change here, and we've got our heads up our butts. The crazy thing is, Congress many times has told the government that they have to release the JFK files, and the government, in defiance of Congress, keeps refusing to release all the JFK files. Many times the JFK files have been, the Congress has passed several times saying that they have to release the JFK files. Well, they still haven't. They still haven't released all of them. I think what's in them has to be so bad, very similar to the Epstein files. The ones, like, even though Congress just passed a law saying that they couldn't redact any of these Epstein files, they still did it anyway. I think Congress is seen as completely impotent, and the government knows that they don't really have to obey them. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, I of course have issued a royal decree in my fake persona of King Travis the Magnificent. I've changed Dan Bongino's name to Dan Bongina, so do with that as you will. We got tricked. Seemed like Kash Patel and Dan was going to do a good job. They were going to get in there and dig out all the corruption and release all the files and do all these things and hold the government accountable. Now, Dan Bongina has quit the government and has come back to the podcast space. It's a meme that he's blocking just about everybody. I think this goes back to my point earlier about hero worship. With hero worship, we are seeing an endless stream of people like Kash and Dan who are these big personalities that swoop in, get the power, and then they do exactly nothing. Or they actively betray us like Trump has. One of the big things I just want to point out is that hero worship is almost always a mistake. Don't even start putting me on a pedestal if I ever become famous, because I'm gonna disappoint you. I'm just a man. We need to put our faith in God and God alone, and we need to do what's right because it's right by Him. So keep that in mind. The gentleman on your screen now is a chemist and engineer from the late 1800s and early 1900s. This man's name is Rudolf Diesel. Mr. Diesel, or Herr Diesel, if you want to go with the German, he is the inventor of the diesel engine, as you can tell by his last name. We still use his technology today. This is one of the biggest stories, I think, of industrial sabotage, because he was approached many times with offers to buy him out and buy his technology, and he consistently refused. One night, he was on board the SS Dresden, September 29th of 1913. He wasn't feeling very well at the party. He said he was going to his cabin, and he was never seen from or heard from again. But the door was locked. Nobody had gone in or out, but Herr Diesel was missing. His body was rumored to have been found by some Dutch fishermen. They said the body was bloated. They didn't bring it with them, but they did take some of his things, like a pocket watch, I think it was, in his wallet. Mr. Diesel was never seen or heard from again. We have just the words from the fishermen as to what happened to him. This, suffice to say, the greatest inventors of our time, a lot of them, they end up, when they truly change the world, change financial power structures, when they change the banks, they have nearly a 100% rate. It's essential to say that we are not in a fair fight. We are not even remotely in a fair fight. But I submit to you, my listeners, the key point of this podcast is that God will never put us in a fair fight. The reason he does that is because he doesn't want us getting full of ourselves and thinking that we're hot shit. He wants the glory, because God does not put us in a fair fight. These stories of these David versus Goliath scenarios, they are everywhere in human history. I'm talking unbelievable odds. You have 5'0" little dudes like David becoming kings. I don't know if you can really say he overthrew Saul, but Saul more overthrew himself. He beat Goliath with faith alone. He stood against the giant, defeated him. Regardless of what your religion is, I submit to you that God never puts us in a fair fight, and that he will never, ever, ever put us in a fair fight, because he wants us to know that, as Psalm 144 says, that he is our strength. He is our fortress. From him flows the victory. We will not have anything without him. And as for the Battle of Cavadonga, as I said earlier, we're going to get a little bit more in detail here. This is the first Christian king of Astoria. He was declared king because he was the leader of those who fled north into the mountains, the Asturian mountains, with the invasion of the Moors and the Umayyad Caliphate. What gets really interesting is just the overwhelming horde that was coming at these 300 men. Some estimates could be propaganda, sure, and saying that some reported numbers are 180,000. It's kind of unlikely, but still, we're talking at least 100,000, you know. But then the Sultan of the Umayyad Caliphate, he was laughing at Don Pelayo and his gang of rebels that was hiding in this cave, as he sent a massive army to go get them. Don Pelayo had chosen his ground very carefully. He chose it in this big cave with dome ceiling. As I showed you earlier, that church, there's a church built there today. He was hiding there, and this massive, let's just say 180,000 man army, because I mean, that's how the Ottomans and the Muslims roll whenever they go into a place. They both basically rely on numbers. They went in. They had brought a collaborator with them. They had brought a bishop. They had brought a bishop from the church. The bishop was sent in to reason with them and convince them to surrender. And he yelled up and said, "Don Pelayo, why don't you just see reason and just submit?" And Don Pelayo walked to the edge of the cliff, and he yelled back down to the bishop, and he said, "Does the Holy Scriptures not say that man with the faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains? Does it not say that trust in the Lord and there will be victory?" So the bishop, being the collaborator and the coward that he is, he went back and told his new masters what was said. And then the army was ordered to march in. The Sultan, one of the most famous lines in all of history, is, "What can 30 wild donkeys threaten us with?" Basically dismissing the rebels as wild donkeys, even cutting their number by a factor of 10. So saying instead of 300 men, it was 30 wild donkeys, you know. They march in. But Don Pelayo had chosen his place for a reason. Because in mountain terrain, 180,000 men is not an advantage. It's what's called a force multiplier. And one day I'm hoping to buy the software so I can simulate these battles for you and show you the formations and things like that. It's expensive. And I don't think you want to sit here watching me play Total War, even though I love that game. The way that these guys did their march up, maybe a few hundred could fit abreast at any time marching up to the cave. The way these men would fight is that they would fight forward and front, right? And while they would have archers shooting over the top of them, raining arrows onto the enemy. So they're fighting in front line, hand-to-hand combat with weapons, and they have arrows raining down on them. Well, the shape of this cave comes into effect. If you miss even by a little bit with your shot shooting at this cave, the arrow is going to ricochet back and actually hit your own guys. So Umayyad archers were killing Umayyad infantry on the front line. And this went on for so long that eventually the bodies pile up and the blood is just flowing like crazy. And these 300 men are actually winning against this insane, almost 250,000 strong army that had wiped out the rest of Spain, right? Well, Visigoths, Spain, Iberia prior to that, right? Well, anyway, they basically start coming out of the cave to fight and doing, and as the confusion starts to just ripple through the ranks and the men start to panic, they can't move anywhere because they're so packed like sardines that they start rolling massive boulders down and crushing them like crazy. Well, it was an absolute bloodbath. Thousands died, even more were trampled. Supply lines were captured, and they tried to get away, but they were being absolutely just slaughtered like it was an absolute kill box. As in this image here, you can see in the very back of the top background, that's kind of how it was being fought. Is you would have archers shooting into that hole back there, and they would be effectively killing their own soldiers, which they didn't know they were killing their own soldiers, but the bodies were piling up anyway. Now here's the best part. This is where it gets real fun. Okay, so they panic and they start retreating. 60-something thousand men, right? Just freaking out, running away, trying to get away. Don Pelayo didn't have any gunpowder. He didn't have any explosives at all. Like, there's nothing he could have done to trigger what happened. A little bit down the way, the mountain collapsed and killed 63,000 men. Kid you not, actually happened. The mountain collapsed and killed most of that army. This defeat was so complete that Umayyads would not march north for a very long time. And this allowed the seedling kingdom of Astoria to take root in the mountains north of Spain. Over the next 800 years, the Muslims would be slowly driven out of Spain, which would be finished around 1492. Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, the very ones who financed Christopher Columbus. So it took 800 years to get their country back, but because one man had the faith the size of a mustard seed, they won. Winning in the cave like that with very well chosen terrain, that's something. But when a freaking mountain falls on your force, like, that's God. Like, if you don't think that's God, your fedora showing, and you should be ashamed of yourself. So anyway, moving on. This is the first siege of Constantinople. This was in 717 AD, Anno Domini, as in the year of our Lord. The Ottomans had sailed a massive navy to Constantinople, and they were laying siege to it. They had the Holy Mother's cloak in the reliquary there. The priests, and they took this cloak out and they marched They in a procession led it around the walls of the entire fortification, praying for divine deliverance. And to prove that the Holy Mother is the new Ark of the Covenant, that night at dark, the most insane storm blew in. Between that and the Greek fire all over the ocean in front of Constantinople, to say that the fleet was destroyed is an understatement. That storm blew in and destroyed everything. We're talking absolute, unbelievable destruction. The Holy Mother did that. Changed my mind. Your fedora is showing if you don't agree with me. This is an old manuscript. This is an old drawing of how Greek fire worked. Of course, they were spraying ships with it. Greek fire, it's long been speculated as to what the chemical makeup of Greek fire is, but it's mostly been lost to time. Some people have their own ideas as to what it has. It was supposedly able to burn underwater, which would mean it would have to have its own oxygen source in the gelatin or whatever that they had sprayed on the ship, and it was almost impossible to put out. It would just keep burning. So the Romans, well, let's just say the Byzantines, but they called themselves the Romans at the time, sprayed this on all of the ships that they could, and then that insane storm blew through, spread it even further. Wind, waves, destruction, just unbelievable chaos. The exact night after they took the Holy Mother's cloak and walked it around the walls of Constantinople. Greek fire is awesome. Cool. Very cool. But you're not going to destroy an entire fleet with just that. You need some help. And that storm, the Holy Mother saved Constantinople. She did so in that way, in such a way that they didn't try again for those 600 years. Just imagine an ass kicking that hard that 600 years later you're like, all right, maybe we can try it again. You know, one of the most famous kings, probably, well, I would say he's more famous for the movie Kingdom of Heaven, but he's still pretty famous even before that. Probably the most famous king in history right now is King Baldwin IV. This was a 16-year-old boy. He had ridden with leprosy, could barely walk and stand on his own. They had to tie him to his horse just so he wouldn't fall off. He led this army against Saladin. Saladin is, of course, a saint in Islam still today. With just 500 soldiers, Baldwin beat him, and Saladin had over 20,000. There's quite a bit of I could keep going on for hours about how many David versus Goliath scenarios happened, but I'm just kind of hitting the highlights to show you that this is what Patrick Henry was talking about. Fear is the passion of slaves. In the Bible, it says, do not be afraid, or be not afraid, or something to that effect, up to roughly 365 times. There is no reason to be afraid, because when you decide to have faith the size of a mustard seed, there is no tyrant, there is no Ottoman horde, Umayyad Caliphate, Saladin himself, or federal agency that can stand against you. I believe that most things in nature are simple, because natural law is very, very simple. We have two choices. We can proceed in fear, or we can proceed in faith. If you choose fear, you're going to be the next one getting poked in the chest by a banker demon. As titanic and unassailable as these struggles seem, the Holy Scriptures tell us that faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. On this podcast, we are going to proceed in faith. I see no point in fearing an enemy, even a perfect enemy, when God and God alone chooses who and when, how and when we die. Our perfect enemy is a tyrant that has managed to control most of the world and lay waste to everyone who would stand in their way, in the way of their plans. I see, frankly, no point in fearing someone who has already lost, because in the end we win. Those who have sold their souls and decided to be a collaborator like that bishop at the Battle of Calvadango, They have sold themselves into slavery. And I think there's a really powerful Shakespeare quote. I believe it's from Richard III, if memory serves, but he says, "The coward does taste the sting of death many times before his end. However, the valiant and the brave only know it once. The King of England is a coward, letting himself be poked in the chest like a servant by an outright demon. Evelyn de Rothschild should have drawn back a bloody nub from this, if King Charles was a proper king. But he's not. He sold his soul. He proceeds in fear." I think what happened with Cash and Dan Bongina is that they got in there on bluster and thunder if they weren't deceiving us, and they're extremely good actors, which they had me fooled. I believed their act. I believed their act. Let's say that way. And they got, I think whoever the real government is, which is obviously the bankers like Evelyn de Rothschild or whatever, the phone rang when they got into their office, and something happened to scare the crap out of them. They chose to proceed in fear. And as you can see here with the Patrick Henry quote, "For it is when people forget God that tyrants forge their chains. Because any man who can make you afraid has already beaten you." Jeremiah 1:5 says, "I knew you before you were born." I submit to you that you are where you have always been, right in the center of the hand of God, where you were designed, where you were born. And if you don't believe that, your fedora is showing, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Of course, naturally, that brings us to our point. What do tyrants fear? If we shouldn't be afraid, what do tyrants fear? Because tyrants, I submit to you, are afraid of just about everything. That's why they always resort to force. That's why they're always trying to ruin people. And they seek so many times to just terror tactics, which you've heard me say on many times on Twitter. The ATF and the FBI are terrorist organizations. We'll get into that in another episode, probably on prohibition, when we do that one. If we choose to proceed in fear, we're moving further away from God. Certain individuals try to twist scripture, and they try to say, "Blessed is the meek, blessed is the weak," whatever. You know, they want to conflate the meaning of meek and weak. What the original word meek meant was power under control. And back before Jordan Peterson decided to join the lizard people, he was talking about how men should be dangerous and how they should willingly control their power. That is a good message. That is meekness. Sure, blessed be the meek. Blessed are those who have their power under control. An armed and educated people, I submit to you, is poor soil in which to grow tyranny. We've talked about strength, we've talked about guns and things like that, but what about knowledge? Hosea 4:6 tells us that my people are destroyed by lack of knowledge and understanding. So we should seek both strength and knowledge. Some try to twist scripture and try to change the meaning of words, trying to say, "Oh, meek. Oh, he says turn the other cheek." Well, you only got 2 cheeks. 4 if you want to count the other 2. Eventually, you got to fight back. Eventually, you have to be like, "No, we're in our cave. This is where we make our final stand. This is where the Umayyad Caliphate dies." And then a mountain falls on them and finishes them off after you've done what you could to them. Back during Prohibition, of course, the ATF didn't exist until 1971, but you still had revenue men who would eventually become the ATF. The FBI would come in and threaten to burn down entire towns. They would kill people just for resisting and trying to save their children from burning homes and things like that. A lot of this has been taken out of the public eye. In most cases, in a lot of areas, like the cities and things like that, you'd have what's called speakeasies where they would just hide and consume their alcohol. But only in Appalachia did these evil pieces of crap finally meet their match. They finally found a people that was not going to just hide from them. We fought back, and we were good at it. We were actually very good at it. This is a newspaper clipping. I'm sorry for the low quality. Maybe one day I'll track it down myself and get you a higher picture, but Prohibition agent killed in fight with moonshiners. As I said a minute ago, an armed and educated people is poor soil in which to grow tyranny. Tyranny like prohibition. Eventually, the feds and the revenue men got tired of going up Copperhead Road and not returning. So they went home and they changed the Constitution. They abrogated the 18th Amendment with the 21st Amendment. They left Appalachia alone. We're still making moonshine to this day, and it is wonderful. This is why I've chosen to make this podcast to be the great object, to echo the words of Patrick Henry, because many books have been written about these things. When just simple, everyday men like me and you, when we refuse to just get on our knees and live on our knees at the feet of tyrants. Tyrants like I'm hoping Abigail Spanberger doesn't turn into, but if she wants to act unwise, she'll see how Virginia rolls, because our culture hasn't changed very much at all. All right. The militia is our ultimate safety, and we can have no security without it. The great object is that every man be armed. That's our first governor, our very first governor, Patrick Henry. Back when we had actual men that had principles leading us. We don't have that anymore because the politicians, they're controlled by the banks. They're controlled by special interest lobbies. They're not controlled by... And of course, they've changed quite a bit of the voting system since then. Originally, in the Constitution, it was cited that Congress would have one representative for every 30,000 people, I believe it was. And if you follow those numbers, we would have over 11,000 congressmen today, not the 435 that were capped with Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, probably the second worst president we've ever had, just because of FDR being so bad. We've got a lot of really bad presidents, but the great object is that we never choose to live in fear and give away our power to these degenerate tyrants. Great object is that we recognize that not only are we supremely capable of bringing our government to heel, but that they are already at heel and awaiting our orders as free men because they are afraid of an armed and educated people. That is the object of the Great Object podcast. My people, the Appalachian people, are the only people who have managed to get an amendment to the Constitution repealed. The militia is our ultimate safety. We can have no security without it. The great object is that every man be armed. We can proceed in fear, or we can proceed in faith. An armed and educated people that strive for strength, education, and being well armed, that is what we need to become. Suffering in the gym, studying in books, learning everything we can, studying these tyrants with history. The Great Object will be a podcast that focuses on history to study our perfect enemy and how we may, through personal excellence, undermine their power. The Great Object will be to seek out peoples who are fighting the same perfect enemy as you and I are and build friendships and coalitions with them. We're going to stop this infighting. We have to. We cannot keep tearing chunks out of the people we need and suing each other over stupid crap. We cannot keep proceeding this way. Otherwise, we ourselves will continue to be ruled by tyrants. The great object will be to study our perfect enemy and their losses in history, their victories, why they won when they won, and to use this knowledge to translate into actionable intelligence that we can use to defeat them in the present day. The great object will be to use what we learn from history as a magnifying lens to leave a better and more secure world for our children. The great object will be to seek out high-quality guests and encourage an open communication, disagreement, agreement, and from the community level all the way to the very top rung of the ladders of power. We can and will win this fight. The great object is that we pursue in all things quality over quantity. 300 wild donkeys is quality. Quantity is 180,000 crushed Umayyad soldiers underneath a mountain. That's what quantity gets you. Our perfect enemy has quantity. We have quality if we choose to seek quality. Great object is to know that in order to defeat a perfect enemy, we ourselves must be better. We must become stronger than they are. We must become smarter than they are. And I assure you, If you think these politicians are stupid, you are fooling yourself. These are not stupid people. They act stupid. They play a very stupid game. Everybody's seen the AOC memes, the ones where Congress is estimated to have an IQ of 83. I don't believe it. I think these are very intelligent people, and they know how to play the game. If you think you're going to be able to just sit around watching football, I don't want to say looking at OF, you know what I mean? We're going to have to be better. We're going to have to be smarter. These are intelligent enemies that we have. That's why I call them the perfect enemy. We have to be reading books. We have to plan our wealth in such a way that it remains safe from their machinations. You can hide gold and silver. But, as people seen with Fuentes, they just took $500,000 out of his account because they felt like it. That's the kind of power that having a centralized bank, that's the kind of power we're giving over to our perfect enemy. We have to plan our wealth. We have to buy gold and silver. We have to invest in our communities. We have to make it sure that our money makes money. And we have to make sure to study their system in such a way and play the game that they have written the rules for. We have to play that game in such a way that we actually manage to find the loopholes in it and defeat them at their own game. And we can do this with study, with gold and silver, possibly with Bitcoin. Bitcoin sounds cool. I don't 100% understand it. I get it that it's supposed to be cryptographic and unhackable because you would have to hack the ledger system. But these bankers, the ones that control all these things, they can and will cut the power grid for huge areas. And then your Bitcoin's practically worthless. So buy some Bitcoin. It seems to be growing, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it. Gold and silver, hiding it, that stays, that grows, because they're never going to quit printing money. We must raise our children and educate them. We must let them know and teach them stories of what their ancestors have done so that they know that that power is still flowing in their veins today, that the family unit is our real defense against these things. Because if you have family that you can count on, you can pretty much do anything. We must raise our children and educate them. We have to make sure that they have a good childhood, that they're brought up in such a way that they know the stories that their ancestors have led the charge on. My personal ancestors helped William the Conqueror take over a kingdom. Of course, he wasn't the terrible king he was at the time, so, I guess they can't really be blamed for that. But if you knew that heroes like Daniel Morgan were your great-great-grandfather, what is that going to do to you? It's going to make it to where you would never allow yourself to have an ordinary life. We have to educate our children and teach them that they can be these great people too. That they don't have to fear tyrants, that they don't have to live in fear, and we have to raise them to know that God is on their side. Ultimately, the great object will be to analyze today's events and economics through the lens of history, so that we may get a hint of what's going to happen based on what has already happened in the past. History, after all, doesn't repeat, but it definitely rhymes. We can rely on history sources like the one I was typing about the other day with Thucydides, who predicted the Peloponnesian War based on just sheer economics. It made economic sense for all those kingdoms to go to war with each other. Again, I am your host, Travis Joshua Wells of Appalachian Liberty. This has been the first episode of the Great Object Podcast. We are only going to grow as fast as you share and teach and tell people about this. Tell people the stories you learn on this podcast. Send me the stories that you think I should know about, because even the best attempt at understanding history always ends up being an oversimplification. So there's always going to be a story that I haven't heard. There's always going to be a story that's just going to blow my freaking mind. Some of the craziest things happen in history, and we're just getting started. We are only going to grow as fast as you share this podcast. We are only going to grow as long as you are liking these podcast episodes, telling your friends about them, sharing the stories, sending me stories. We're only going to grow that fast. So I'm relying on you now. Like, I can sit here and be a history nerd all day long, but without you, this is going to go nowhere. I need you to like, I need you to comment, I need you to subscribe. And more importantly, I'm going to need your financial support to grow this and make it higher quality, because I'm going to have to take classes. I'm going to have to buy software. I'm going to need another microphone so I can get guests in person. I'm going to need another headset so I can get guests in person. The most important thing I can ask you to do is donate. It's only $1 on Twitter, or you can do the buy me a coffee thing. With your financial support, I'm going to keep buying equipment. I'm going to keep investing it in this podcast. I live a very simple life. I eat for $5 a day. I've lost 65 pounds this past year, so I'm not even really eating that much anyway. I'm not one to buy a bunch of fancy stuff. We're going to put all the money that you send in, we're going to put it to work. And we're going to keep spreading this message of let's learn from history so we don't have to be afraid of tyrants. You can become a member on Buy Me a Coffee as well. I think the tiers are 5, 10, 15, and 50. I don't know what the bonuses are, but with your support, you're going to have access to me. You're going to have like round the clock access to me for the most part. Like you're going to join a special subscribers only channel. And anytime you have an idea or something you'd like to see, I'm going to immediately get on that. Like, I'm going to take it seriously. I'm going to get on that. You know what I mean? The links are in the description to all this stuff. But with your financial support, we're going to have access to me. You're going to get early access to what we're working on here. I'm going to ask your opinions on things, take your advice, and you'll even have the ability to request guests and even guest yourself. I'm going to be building an actual podcast studio in the basement. It won't just be the green screen like you see here or me sitting in my office. It's going to be an actual podcast studio, like the big ones like Timcast and everything. I've got a mixer that can handle 2 guests right now, but I can buy attachments that allow for 4. I am also going to do drywall, sound insulation, all that. I'm going to do all that work myself, so I'm not wasting your money on labor and all that, because I got a lot of skills. I know how to do a lot of things. So please donate what you can. I promise to put it to work. I promise that it's going to actually be used to buy equipment. It's not going to be used for a bunch of nonsense. Even if I was a billionaire, I'd probably still drive my little Subaru out there. All those fancy cars and stuff like that is just nonsense in my mind. I just don't believe in impractical things. It's just not me. Share this podcast with your friends, but make sure to watch this. But make sure they watch episode 1 first, which is this episode. I want them to understand the mission statement behind what they're watching. They deserve just a straight hearing it from me what this podcast is going to be, because my mission is to defeat tyrants, and we're going to defeat them by personal excellence until they come and Gary Weber, Terrence Yakey me, and then of course when they inevitably rule it a self-delete, I just want you to be like, no, I didn't, because I'm not like that. There's no way, not a chance. I would like to invite you along for this project. What we're going to do, what we're going to see, what we're going to talk about, I'm excited. I really am. I love talking about history. I love analyzing history. I love talking about the absolute chaos and disaster that befalls these tyrants when they finally meet a few men that just absolutely refuses to bow down and live on their knees. At the end of every episode, I want to have what's called a mail call. And open up things that have been sent to me. One of my subscribers has sent me these. This is as a business, and he wanted me to try these. He didn't charge me a penny for them. I was like, dude, I'll pay you, and he's like, nah, man, no. I'm like, okay, all right. Let's open this up, see what's up. I'm gonna be 100% honest. I've never, because I'm a real, like, I'm more of a redneck. Like, I've never used anything like super tactical before. It's always been like the stuff you get from Walmart mostly. But we're gonna open this up and just take a look at these. I'll probably do a video later of showing these actually in action when I figure out how to use them. I got a brown one here. Let's pick that up. Yep, it's a 3-point sling. And he sent me another one here. Sorry, buddy, I'm just opening these. I know it's been a couple months since you sent them to me, but I really wanted to do this on video for my first podcast episode. Oh, man, he even sent a promo code. Heck yeah. Okay, let's see here. AppTac USA for the mail call here. He says, thank you for being a true patriot. Promo code is 1776 for you and your followers. Signed, Steve from AppTac USA. So let's see if we can get that in the camera here. Well, yep. Promo code 1776. I'm going to treat that as a sponsor. Thank you, Steve. Hell yeah, brother. All right. So yeah, all cards on the table. I've never used a tactical sling before. I've never used a 3-point sling, but I've got some buddies who are in the service and former law enforcement. I'm sure they're going to come by and probably be able to teach me how to do that pretty shortly. But yeah, thanks to AppTac USA. We're just going to call him our first sponsor because that's pretty freaking huge, man. I mean, you just sent me like $70-$80 worth of slings there, and all I had to do was just kind of show them on a camera. That's pretty cool. So yeah, promo code 1776, AppTac USA. I'm going to, in the editing process, I'm going to put that on the screen here somewhere. And make sure to click that. Show Steve some love. I really, really appreciate that. That is like the super coolest thing in the world. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. The other side of the card. Here we go. Tell you what. This has got his barcode on it, and I'm going to try to scan this and put it on the yeah, I'm going to actually just put this on the screen, right? Put the website, 100% American-made tactical gear solutions, AppTac USA, proudly serving American patriots in the military, law enforcement, and the 2A community. I haven't served in the military, nor have I been law enforcement. I tried to become law enforcement, and they just never got back to me. And the 2A community. I guess I'm 2A community because gun rights come from God. They don't come from the government. So yes, I will be putting these cards on the screen, and you guys definitely go show Steve some love. It's got his phone number, it's got his website, and it's got his barcode. Absolutely. AppTac USA. All right. Now, most important part of the podcast here. Homework. And I know you're like, oh no, oh man, homework. All right, listen. You're a fat ass. You need to stop being a fat ass. I am a fat ass, and we need to stop being a fat ass. Your homework is to do 50 push-ups before the next podcast comes out. When that's going to happen, it's probably going to be a couple weeks because I have been talking for hours now. So, do 50 push-ups. Doesn't have to be all at the same time. Just get 50 done before the next couple of weeks. Do 5 a day. It's going to take you 10 days. Doing 2 push-ups is better than doing 0 push-ups. Eventually, you're going to be able to do 3. Eventually, you're going to be able to do 4. Eventually, you're going to be able to do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You could get all the way up to One Punch Man and do 100. But you got to make a habit of it. So, I'm going to be doing this homework too. I usually do ab rollers. I usually do the, which, I don't know if you can consider those push-ups, but I'm going to do the push-ups and the ab rollers because I really am trying to lose a lot of weight. I've lost little over 60 this past year since last February. So we're going to stop being a fat piece of shit, and we're going to get better physically. All right. Now this is probably even more important than homework number 1. I want you to get to know your neighbors. I want you to get to know their names. preferably where they were born, what their skills are, hopes and dreams, things that they want to see, that they want to do in their lives. Know their children's names. If you don't have the social skills to strike up these conversations, I highly recommend going to look at Charisma on Command. Back when I was developing my social skills, I watched a lot of their videos. I haven't done their class, but they can teach you how to they can teach you how to start conversations, small talk, things like that. One book I can suggest is How to Talk to Anyone by Lil Lowndes. I'll put that on the screen here in editing. It'd probably be like right here. Yeah, right there. Also, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's a big one. But the Lil Lowndes one, that's more of an updated version of the same type of material. You need to learn to talk to your neighbors. Here in Appalachia, we take care of our neighbors. We take care of them a lot. You've seen pretty much everybody everywhere mobilize all at the same time when Hurricane Helene hit. And we were able to beat, I don't want to say beat off, because, yeah, I'm leaving that in and editing. Fuck that. Okay, so we were able to beat back the tyranny of FEMA, trying to take things from people. They were flying into camps, doing rotor washes and blowing materials everywhere. They later tried to say it was a mistake, but that's a pretty stupid mistake. Anybody that's trained on those helicopters knows what a rotor wash is, and they know that it's a very effective riot control technique. Well, anyway, get to know your neighbors. Get to care about them. You have elderly neighbors that can't salt their own steps. I want you to go get a freaking bag of salt, and I want you to salt your steps when it snows, okay? Learn to get your community together. Learn your neighbors' names, because when disaster hits, that's not the time to be learning your neighbors' names. That's not the time to be understanding who is an asset and who is a problem. You need to be knowing your neighbors right fucking now. Get to know them, shake their hands, spend time sitting on the porch talking to them. Bring a bottle of moonshine over, and, well, jar of moonshine over, and just sip away the afternoon with them. Get to know them, you know. Cook something, take it to them. Be like, hey, I'm sorry we never got to meet. Time gets away from me. I meant to come and welcome you guys to the neighborhood if they're new. Just look up small talk technique videos. Get to know your neighbors. That's your homework for next podcast as well. For the third one, you need to read or listen to Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe. Okay? This book is free on the Mises.org website. It is also free to listen to as an audiobook on YouTube. Go listen to this book and understand how democracy is just a pressure release valve for tyrants, so that it prevents them from being overthrown, so that they don't have to worry about insurrections and things like that. Learn this book, and I want you to come back to here once you've finished listening to it or reading it, and I want you to tell me what your favorite part was, and we're going to talk about it. I'm actually going to respond to your messages, okay? You can also just hit me up on Twitter and talk to me about it. If you're a subscriber and you're in the Signal chat, you can talk to me about it there. But I do want to talk to you about it. We need to discuss this book. It's a very important, very, very important book for you to understand. Again, it's free on the Mises.org website. That is, it is also free as a audiobook on YouTube. Until next time, I will leave you with the words of Patrick Henry. The militia is our ultimate safety. We can have no security without it. The great object is that every man be armed. Again, I am your host, Travis Joshua Wells. Thank you so much for watching this first episode. Please comment, like, share, subscribe. Needs to happen. Otherwise, we will not grow. You and you alone can decide whether we're going to grow or not. If you found this episode valuable, like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. Tell them about my Twitter channel, and we can talk and shoot the breeze there. Thank you so much for your time. The militia is our ultimate safety. We can have no security without it. The great object is that every man be armed. Thank you, and good night.